I'm pretty sure all of you know by now, but my name is Audrey and my channel is Perpetual Pages. I am a queer, trans, and non-binary Mexican-American book reviewer, and I've been reviewing books for 7 years on the internet, which is wild. And I am thrilled to be here with Mason Deaver, author of I Wish You All the Best, which is available in both hardback and paperback now. So if you are a thrifty person and you would like to buy it at any point, it is available now. So thank you so much for being here, Mason, and welcome to Quarantine Pages.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
I mean, I just want to start by saying, it has been a time on the internet, right, to be trans spec or enby spec, especially this last month. It has been quite a ride. So it's just powerful to have this moment where we're just celebrating our enby selves and enby stories. So I'm really excited. We're going to start by talking about your debut book, which I just talked about, I Wish You All the Best. So for anyone joining us who doesn't know, how would you describe I Wish You All the Best?
You would think that almost 2 years of having to pitch this book, I would get better at it, but I don't. It never once gets any easier. But I Wish You All the Best is about 18-year-old Ben DeBacher who comes out to their parents as non-binary, and it doesn't go very well. They are immediately forced out of their home with not even shoes on their feet or time to grab their cell phone or anything. Eventually they find a phone they can use. They call their sister Hannah, who they have not seen in a decade, and Hannah takes Ben in. Just as quickly as Ben comes out, they go back into the closet at this new school. They only have half of their senior year left. They don't want to cause any more issues, and they just want to stay under the radar. And then that's when Nathan comes along and thinks that plan is not a good one. He doesn't like it, not at all. Through the course of their last semester of high school, Ben comes to terms with a lot of things with the help of Nathan, the people around them, and sometimes just themselves. Yeah, it's a happy story. I promise everyone who hasn't read it yet. It's a happy story with a kiss at the end. That's it.
That's true. That is important to note, because it does go through the serious topics and addresses the microaggressions and the struggles and all that stuff, but it has a happy ending. It is hopeful, so if that's important to you, take note. So to start off, I Wish You All the Best has become, I would say, one of the seminal titles when it comes to non-binary rep in YA fiction. So after you sold it and you were continuing to work on it, did you have any inkling of how valuable and widespread it would turn out to be? And did that add any pressure to know that you were going to have one of the few, and I would say one of the biggest mainstream non-binary stories at the time?
The thing is that whenever I was writing it, I never once thought about that in the way that it has happened in this reality. I mean, I didn't even think about it being a, quote, big deal until we sold it to Scholastic, because unfortunately in publishing, whoever buys you has a lot to do with how received your book can be. And I'm glad that I found Scholastic. I'm glad that they found us. Glad we found each other. I don't think I Wish You All the Best could have had a better home, really, with a better team behind it. Honestly, I never felt the pressure until probably the cover reveal, which is, I think, when people started to take a lot of notice of the book, and instantly I just kind of felt, oh, this thing that is deeply personal to me, that has a lot of my own feelings about gender, sexuality, is going to be very public and basically just up for purchase. And it doesn't get any easier, unfortunately, especially with currently writing book 2. That stress is still there, and it's kind of only building, especially with how I want to tackle transness and gender feelings in book 2. It's just kind of always something in the back of my mind. I wish I had a better way of dealing with it, and I wish I had advice out there for anyone who is looking for any, but I mean, it just kind of comes with the territory of publishing. I don't want to call it a new voice, but I guess it kind of is, because there's truly not a lot of non-binary stories out there. Thankfully, that's changing. I feel like almost any marginalized author can tell you the pressure they feel from having to basically be a spokesperson for their community, which is a lot of unfair pressure, but it's there, and what can we do about it?
Truly. Yeah, especially like we were saying, when it's a voice that hasn't been heard before, or an identity that's not as represented wanted, it becomes like the expectation for like what
Yeah.
it is, which we'll maybe talk about a little bit later. But yeah, you had a whirlwind debut year. It was wild, and I don't know how you survived it.
I truly don't either.
I know. Kind of related to that, did you always know that you wanted your first book to be about a non-binary character, or like how did the idea and concept for I Wish You All the Best come about?
Ben and Nathan have been there from the beginning in my head. Whenever I first sat down and I wanted to write a story about identity and sort of finding yourself, Ben and Nathan were always there. It wasn't a story about being trans. I hadn't discovered that part of myself yet. Ben was a cis boy. I don't talk about this a lot, and it's super embarrassing, but the original pitch, or the original I Wish You All the Best, was a college love story, still between Ben and Nathan, of course, where Ben was experiencing all these new things because they only knew their small town home life, and Nathan was going to be there to not exactly teach Ben how to come out of their shell, but much like Nathan is in I Wish You All the Best, sort of be a driving force for Ben to get their foot out the door and then discover themselves. And it was going to be Ben discovering their sexuality and falling in love with Nathan. And I think the only thing that might still be from that original draft, just other than like Ben and Nathan's character traits and descriptions, is there was definitely a rooftop scene in that draft of the book. That was one of those stories that I just kind of fell off of. So a few months later, I changed it to high school. And in that draft, it was Nathan was a new kid. Ben was charged with showing Nathan around and being the accountability buddy, even though they didn't want to do that. They just wanted to stay under the radar. It wasn't even in that draft. I think it was in the next draft whenever I wrote about Ben being new to this school that I discovered my own transness, my own non-binariness, and I was still very confused. And I was like, you know what? Let's just write out these questions in a book. And whenever I Google them to find these answers for these questions that I also have, you know, I have the answer now.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad through all that, at least you kept the roof scene, because that was iconic. Very important, very central.
It's still my favorite.
Yeah. No, that's interesting that you say it started off as like Ben being cis. I feel like a lot of queer authors, like a lot of their early work is like very cis, very straight, because like they just don't even know like that they have permission to write other things. So that's wild.
Whenever I like first kind of wanted to get into writing, I tried to write a fantasy series that, oh god, that was a lot. But it was, I remember it just being like the most heteronormative like thing, and I could tell you that if I went back and reread it, I'd be like, oh, all of these characters are queer coded and definitely just like not into each other in any way other than a platonic friendship. But yeah, I didn't see it even back then.
I know, I definitely wrote my fair share of like cis white gay men stories, and I am ashamed.
It's how we grow. It's
That's
how we
grow. Yes, you kind of mentioned it that your goal wasn't necessarily to write about transness, but what were some of your goals in writing I Wish You All the Best, and what were some of your concerns?
My two biggest intentions with the book were things that weren't exactly even related to transness. I mean, of course, I wanted to write a story where a trans character gets the happy ending. They get the hints at a future, they get the boyfriend, they get everything that they deserve, because, you know, trans characters deserve the world. But the two big things that I wanted to talk about in the book and to showcase specifically were the therapy and then the elements of community and the internet. Thankfully, this has died down a lot. But I feel like so much YA from early on to like even late 2000s just vilifies therapy and medication and mental illness. I didn't like that, because for any teenager, but especially a marginalized teenager, whether it be their race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, they're going through a lot, especially American teenagers in the current climate. Therapy can be a life-saving thing for anyone of any age, but especially teenagers. And I wanted to make sure that that was represented. I wanted to have a doctor that Ben eventually came to trust. I wanted to show the unease there, because it can be so hard to trust a new person with all these deep issues that are rooted in your life. It doesn't even come up, but the fact that Hannah says, if you don't like this doctor, we can find you a new one, because it's not always a perfect fit the first go around. Like sometimes it can take you months to find the right doctor. And then the elements of community that I wanted to capture specifically was the internet and how it can influence teenagers when it comes to figuring things out about their sexuality or their gender. Ben only has the vocabulary for what they are and who they are because of like YouTube videos and watching Miriam's coming out videos and dissection videos about gender and sexuality. It was important to me because that's how I discovered these things about myself. I watched coming out videos. I watched people talk about sexuality and gender, the intersection of them, and how it all sort of connects together. I feel like it's a common thing to explore in a book that's maybe more about like nerd geeky fandom kind of stuff, but it's also integral to a lot of queer people finding your community online.
Especially because we are not taught these things in school, so we sort of have to discover them for ourselves. So online community is huge, and yeah, I definitely like what you did with therapy in the story as well, especially because Ben is not trusting at first, and they're very like hesitant to give into it, and you know, they don't know how it works. Like, are you going to tell my sister this? Like, you know, what's confidential, what's not? So I thought that was really great. I think you did a good job with that.
People would probably tell me that like you shouldn't write a scene where two characters just talk about consent forms, but that actually came from Becky Albertalli, who was very prevalent in the writing of the book, and she was just like, this might be an interesting thing you can discuss that kids might not know about, that unless you are an immediate danger to others or to yourself, it's illegal for your doctor to talk about you outside of the office unless you give explicit permission or they feel like something might happen.
On a slightly different note, something I see in a lot of reviews for I Wish You All the Best, mostly from cis and non-queer readers, is like the sentiment of, this story taught me so much about the non-binary experience. So I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts when you hear that kind of response? And like, is that something you want to be the takeaway from the story?
I have so many mixed feelings about it. I appreciate that it was my work and my words that taught you these things. I can appreciate that you took something away from the book that you didn't know before. In the kindest way possible, I do not care. I never once wrote the book for cis readers. There's so much in the book that I did want to explain and sort of give context for, but I never wanted to go into it beyond the context that anyone would need to read. The things that I wanted to discuss through writing and through discovering my own transness, from reading books by and about trans people, watching movies, documentaries, things like that, I realized these things I was writing about were integral to the trans experience, but also they were integral to my trans experience. I shouldn't be doing this, but like the worst take I've ever seen about my book is someone getting upset with me because whenever Ben tries on Hannah's pants for the party, they don't have a giant moment of like realization, like, oh, these women's pants are perfect. I'm like, no, because the first time I wore women's pants, I just wore the pants. Yeah. Like, it doesn't always have to be a capital T thing. I wrote the book for trans people to see themselves. I wrote the book for teenagers who might be confused about how they see their body, how they feel about their body. I wrote it so that they would know that they're not alone in those feelings. I never, not one time, considered the opinion of cis people's thoughts about my book.
I mean, who needs it, right?
Honestly,
I didn't ask. Again, it kind of goes back to how it's like there's only so many non-binary books out there, so sometimes people approach it like as a textbook instead of like I don't know, just an exercise in empathy, or just like to get a little bit more into Ben. The story opens up with that heart-wrenching scene where they've just come out to their parents and their parents are kicking them out, like you talked about. So why was that experience of like parental disownment important for you to explore in this story and even start off with? So the book originally did not start off with the coming out scene. My editor wanted me to explore the coming out scene. I was like, okay, this is going to be very tough. In my head, the coming out scene is a violent one. It's Ben being disowned by parents and being mistreated, and it's a lot of transphobia. So I never wanted to actually write that scene. It's why the book started where it did. And whenever I was charged with basically opening the book in a very violent way, I was like, okay, if they want me to do this, I'm going to do this
the way I want to. I never wanted to show the coming out. The scene ends just before Ben says the words, and then the next chapter starts immediately after. And I give allusions to the scene, but I never wanted to specifically write it because I didn't want to show that. It was a personal choice, but also I knew that if trans people are going to read the scene, they'll understand what happened. They'll understand the build-up, and they'll understand the hard cut, and they'll know what happened. I don't have to explain it to them. Any allusions I make to it later are just sort of been remembering these details. When it came to the parents, it ended up being sort of an accidental theme, and it ties back to the community element of the book somewhat. I wanted to write a story where the main character realizes that forgiveness does not have to be given. I feel like you can learn to let go of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean forgiving someone. Ben's parents kicked them out of the house at the beginning of January without shoes, without a phone, without anything. You don't have to forgive that.
Yeah.
That's one of the worst things you can do to a person. It's definitely the worst thing you can do to your kid. And so again, spoilers, but probably 3/4 of the way through the book, Ben's parents come back into the picture. And I wanted to make sure that Ben never forgave them. I wanted to showcase that even people as close to you as your parents, people who literally made you, mm-hmm. and you are their whole, you don't have to forgive that, which I feel like is something that trans teens specifically, but any queer person can learn. If these people wrong you, you don't have to give them the time of day. You don't have to forgive them. You don't have to let them back into your life.
That's especially true, confronting that the people who are closest to you in your life can hurt you the most and all mm-hmm. that stuff. Yeah, that is extremely true. And also just this idea of you can be okay if your parents don't support you. There's still other people out there. There's still hope, which we love. So to talk more about the sort of difficulties addressed in the story, I Wish You All the Best also shows the very real experience of being misgendered or being referred to with the incorrect pronouns, especially in casual encounters with people you don't necessarily know. And a big part of the story is also how Ben makes the choice to go back into the closet for their own protection as they start at this new school. So what drew you to exploring those experiences of never fully being out?
I mean, I just did it because it's my experience. I, all the time in just basic interactions, have to decide if it's worth it to come out. Whenever I don't know, I order a cup of coffee and the barista hands it to me. It's like, sir, here's your coffee. I'm like, do I even want to devote the energy to what is going on here? And 99.9% of the time, I don't. It's whatever. My friends and the people closest to me respect my pronouns, and that's all I need. Ben was kind of my outlet for a lot of things, but especially the misgendering. Whenever I was writing it, I was working a full-time day job at my hometown's library, where even the people I was out to didn't respect my pronouns. And it was very hard because these people told me we see you and we understand you, yada yada. And it's like, okay, but you don't. Mm-hmm. Don't be two-faced like that. It's either this or that. It's not in between. Ben has the same anxiety and depression that I have, in a sense. They find it impossible to correct people, especially whenever they go back in the closet. It wasn't something I almost purposefully did. It was just something that I wanted to show that coming out is a repeat process. You have to do it almost all the time, especially if you are trans or non-binary, gender non-conforming, genderqueer. Coming out is a constant process with new people you meet and even sometimes your friends. It's something that I've definitely struggled with. Again, going back to it, it's just I took these things that I was struggling with very hard and I just kind of poured them into a book. It was like, this is my free therapy. This is how I'll get these emotions and these feelings out.
I'm always talking about this with my trans friends, but yeah, it's always you kind of have to make a choice when you're in public spaces. You have to choose to be one thing or another depending on the situation for whatever reasons. Could be medical reasons, could be professional reasons, whatever it may be. And yeah, you just kind of have to make a choice. And that came up when I came out to my parents, because they were like, okay, but not everyone's gonna know that you use these pronouns. I'm like, okay, just because I go to the bank and the teller calls me ma'am, I can't stop living my life. I can't correct everyone, It's I'm telling you because I care about you and the way you address me. So
exactly,
get on the train or get left behind is my point of view.
You have to dedicate that energy to the people you feel like it's worth it. And sometimes that is everyone you meet and every interaction you have. And sometimes it's just your parents or just your friends. And there's no wrong way to handle handle it.
Another idea the story challenges is this idea of androgyny that people mistakenly associate with being non-binary, which is often very white, very featureless, very stick thin, a little bit mask, you know. Did you write Ben with the intention of poking holes in that concept, or like how did you approach that?
I mean, again, it all goes back to my own personal sort of dealings with that kind of thing, because whenever I first learned of the word non-binary, thankfully this has changed, but like a quick Google search just is like super pale white people, no eyebrows, or like cheekbones that you could cut something with, a size 0, like it looks unhealthy with like bright colored hair. And I was like, this isn't it. This
isn't anything.
This isn't anything. Like, first of all, most of these people are probably models, and this was a photo shoot with Photoshop, so like we can take that out of the bag right now. Secondly, I don't know how it specifically led to like this misconception about people being non-binary and having to present this way. I mean, one of my favorite parts of the book is whenever Ben is sort of dissecting these parts of themselves that if you go by like an older, or like just the definition of androgyny, it would misqualify them from being non-binary. Like they talk about the armpit hair and like the hair on their chest and their face and like all these different features, and it's things that I exactly struggle with. Like I go through ebbs and flows, but like most of the time I hate having any kind of hair that is not my eyebrows or my hair on my head. Like I hate having any of it. It doesn't connect with me. It's the body dysmorphia of it all. I feel like within the last 2 years, 3 years maybe, we've had so many different people come out as non-binary or gender non-conforming. It's thankfully been people of all shapes, sizes, skin color. I think people have finally realized, especially when it comes to being non-binary, but you know, being anything really, there's no one right way to be something. So long as you're comfortable in your own body, that's what matters.
So, and of course, I want to talk about the relationship between Ben and Nathan, which is really soft and really sweet. So if you're looking for that, anyone, it's there. So their relationship is really like a safe space where Ben doesn't feel the need to like explain themselves because they just feel seen in a way. So I want to know, what was your main focus in exploring that relationship between Ben and Nathan?
I like the way you described it, because Nathan is the safe space for Ben. Despite the fact that Ben experiences most of their anxiety around Nathan, I would say, and coming out to Nathan, I, having written Ben's point of view, know that deep within the back of their head, despite all of these feelings, they always know that Nathan would accept them. They knew that Nathan wouldn't be this cruel, unkind person. It's just that's how anxiety and intrusive thoughts work. Your brain can be very mean to you and convince you of things that could never in all your life happen. I wanted Nathan to be that person for Ben, because even despite the worries about coming out and their attraction to Nathan, Ben never feels unsafe around Nathan. When Nathan comes along and sort of has this ultimate desire to just protect Ben in any way he can, I feel like Ben latches onto that, and that's sort of where the beginning of their relationship comes from. No matter how you operate, like I feel like we all want at least some degree of this kinship that we can share with someone, and Nathan just kind of happens to be that person for Ben.
Now we can move into talking about your next book, which I cannot wait for, and actually Kathy and I were just talking about it, and I know you recently announced it's going to officially be in 2021, and I know it's called The Ghost We Keep. That's pretty much all I know. So can you speak a little bit more on what the story is about?
So The Ghost We Keep is about a teenager named Liam who is like struggling already because being a teenager is hard. They kind of have this feeling that their two best friends in the world have begun to distance themselves as a relationship between the two of them has formed, and they've sort of accidentally become the third wheel, and they just feel like they're getting left behind. In the midst of these feelings, Liam's brother Ethan is killed tragically one night. It's a combination of all these different things, mostly Liam having to deal with grief and losing someone that close to you, as well as these feelings of abandonment, because with the death of a child comes a lot of feelings for their parents. Liam just feels ignored. Mostly it's just grief. It's losing people in a permanent way and losing them in an emotional way, and perhaps finding out things about the people that you thought you were closest to and discovering new things. Hopefully that sold it to anyone still watching.
Obviously, as you're talking about it, The Ghost We Keep is quite a bit darker than I Wish You All the Best, which, to its own credit, talked about some difficult things. And I know you mentioned it's going to explore how, like, gender identity and possibly first love and how all that is, like, tangled up with grief and loss and losing people permanently or temporarily, like you said. So what was the bigger picture for you in incorporating those themes?
The book, as most of my stories apparently seem to be, was free therapy. I started writing the book whenever my father was killed in 2017, and it became a lot more than that. As awful as it is to say, a book about a student at a high school dying is a lot more marketable and more interesting than a book about a father dying. And also, I was far too close to the source material that I was trying to write. When it came to sort of evolving past that and the other story elements like friendship breakups, I'd gone through many friendship breakups over the last 3 or 4 years. Some of them just as simple as drifting apart because you no longer have anything in common. Some of them because it turned out the people were not the greatest in the world. I feel like a friendship breakup is not something that's explored a ton in young adult, which sucks because I feel like that's probably the age range where you have like the most friendship breakups, because you move through different years of high school, through different classes, you meet new people, you stop talking to the old ones, and then even whenever you're out of high school, you're no longer around these people every single day for 8+ hours, so you realize, oh, I didn't have as much in common with them as I thought I did. That's just kind of how life is, unfortunately. So I really wanted to cover the feelings that come with this abandonment, just kind of from all angles, really.
Yeah, I agree that friendship breakups are not talked about in YA fiction as often as they should be, because I feel like it's one of the most common kinds of loss that young folks experience, and like there's just like not enough weight given to friendship and platonic relationships and like how they affect our lives. Like they have a deep, profound effect on our lives, and like we never talk about going through them. It sucks. To kind of return to what we were talking earlier about pronouns, I saw you posting on Twitter recently about how you really wanted to write Liam, the main character of The Ghost We Keep, as using both he and they pronouns, which is totally valid and totally a thing that happens in life, even if the cis don't believe. But you were concerned that cis readers especially wouldn't understand the nuance of that choice and would use it as an excuse to gender Liam as a boy when they aren't. So are you still struggling through that choice, and like how do you feel about it now as you're continuing to work on the manuscript?
So whenever you sent me the list of questions as like a quick reread or like a synopsis of what we're going to talk about, this was the one that I was excited to get to the most. Because I have feelings.
Yes.
I have feelings. It was kind of immediately after tweeting that I knew my answer. You know, one would argue that you should not treat Twitter as your diary, especially your public Twitter, as a diary.
Yes.
But I was like, you know what? No, this is something that is weighing on me. I hadn't recently read the book at that point, because I think this was maybe like a week and a half ago. Time is blending together and not real. I think it had been like maybe 2 or 3 weeks since I had last like fully read the book, and it was just sort of sitting on me. I think probably it burst because I probably was tagged in another Instagram review where Ben was misgendered or whatever. So I've gotten to a point in my life where I just remove the tag. If you want me to pay attention to your post, then like you read the book. Just read the book and process the information that I laid out for you very clearly.
Yes.
But when it came to Liam, I got my answer almost immediately, which was basically, fuck that.
Yeah.
Whenever I wrote Ben, it was always they, them, and the way they look and the way they dress. Whenever I wrote Liam, it was always he, they. For my planned third book, I have 2 main characters, one of whom is a trans boy, and the other is a teenager who through the course of the book discovers their non-binary identity. And those characters have always been that way for me. Just from the get-go, they've just always been that way. It's just how kind of my mind works. So Liam, even if I never give a story reason for it, has always been he, they to me. And nothing can change that. And I know that it's going to happen. I know that cis readers, let's just call it like you say, cis readers are going to see that, and any time that Liam is referred to as he by a cis reader, it's never going to feel genuine in the way that something like that would come from a trans reader. It'll never feel that way because my mind is always going to read it as they just see Liam being masculine and dressing in a traditionally masculine way. They just see that and like, oh, Liam's a boy who like goes by they sometimes, like whatever. He, Liam's a he. It's none of those things that comes with the territory of writing a trans character, especially whenever you're writing a trans character that doesn't abide by the rules that cis people have set up for us for some reason. I don't know how that happened, but
I don't either.
Like it's got to be he, she, they. Like it's nothing else. It's no other kind of pronoun, and you can only get one. That's it, which is bullshit. But then to go back to an earlier answer, I just don't care what cis people think. You could not pay me to care less about how cis people read my book. It's there for my trans readers. And maybe I'm assuming too much, but like I feel like whenever a trans reader reads how I describe gender in the book, because another thing I wanted to do was make it a book where the character already knows how they identify. Like there's not really a lot of turmoil in Liam's head about their identity. They have feelings about how people see them and how their parents see them, but it doesn't go beyond that. There's no coming out moment. There's no big bold statement about gender. Like Liam is just the way they are. That's how I wanted to do it. It's already a book that's packed full of a lot of things. Whenever trans readers read that, I have faith that they'll get it, and that's what I care about. Not the cis reader being able to process, oh, how confusing is it to have two pronouns? Like, oh, like I don't care. That's your baggage to sort through, not mine.
Yeah, it's like cis people who asked you, like
really, who asked for your opinion?
Who asked for your rules? Like, we don't want them. We're not interested. Yeah.
It's like made-up rules that you've given us.
I'm glad that you've gone that way because we definitely need to see more, like, multi-pronoun, non-binary folks. I think it's cool. I collected a few questions from NB book readers and reviewers. So, first is from Adriana from Boricua Reads, who wants to know, what are your characters' BTS biases? And I'm assuming you mean all of your characters, whether they listen to K-pop or not.
I can assure you that Liam listens to BTS.
Good.
Liam, music is an integral part of book 2 for me, and Liam makes their own music, and they're trying to produce their own music and write it. And so there's a lot of allusions to a lot of kinds of music. So I can 100% assure people that probably the 3 main characters of The Ghost We Keep all listen to BTS.
Love it. It's canon.
Ben, probably V for Ben, probably because I think V is the prettiest.
Okay.
I wouldn't think that Ben would listen to a lot of music, so
I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, they didn't even know who Troye Sivan was. So it's
no.
like
I wanted to be a troll and be like, Mason, what Troye Sivan song were they listening to in the book?
Listen, oh my god. It's on my website. It's everywhere I can think to put it, and yet, oh my god, this is actually so tough. Nathan's probably Namjoon, and I don't really have a reason for that.
Okay. I see it.
And then we can do Ghost We Keep characters next. So Liam's a Jimin stan for the same reasons that Ben is a V stan, but Liam would never admit it. They're just like, oh, Jimin's got such a good voice, but no, it's also because they think that Jimin's the prettiest. Vanessa probably likes all 7 of them very equally. The way I imagine her mind working is she's very methodical in the music she listens to. Like she thinks about it a lot. Like she wants to dissect each and every piece because she makes music too, and that's just kind of how her mind works. So she probably likes all 7 of them. Let's just say Joel's Jungkook.
Finally, somebody had to be. Come on. Kate from Chapter Kate says, I'd love to know if there are any characters or icons from pop culture that have inspired the characters you write.
I like to think that my characters are my own, which sounds like such a bitchy way to say that, but my characters are kind of more an amalgamation of different experiences, both ones that I have lived and ones that like I've learned from friends, people around me, the internet. Like, so I'm sure that there are like more famous people or pop culture icons that have inspired my characters, but I don't think I can actually name any.
Right, not like consciously. They're just in there. They're all coming in together. R from R. Jensen, who's actually here, asks, keeping up with the music theme, do you listen to specific playlists while writing? And I would add, what is on those playlists? Like, are there artists that make reoccurring appearances on the playlists?
I do listen to a lot of music whenever I write. It's always kind of accidental. Like sometimes I'm listening to music on shuffle on Spotify and a song comes up and I'm like, oh, that's like perfect for this. I guess I don't shout it from the rooftops enough, but I Wish You All the Best has a full playlist on Spotify. Each song correlates to like a specific part of the book, and I don't want to like give it away, but it's all there. The link is always on my website under I Wish You All the Best's book page. There's a direct link that'll take you to it. But music plays a big part in what I write. It always feels like at the end of the day, there's like a very specific song choice. Like I Wish You All the Best in my head, it's a lot of Paramore, it's a lot of Troye Sivan, some Haley Kiyoko sprinkled in there. I feel like it's representative of the story I'm trying to tell. So I Wish You All the Best playlist is an hour and 6 minutes, and then the playlist for The Ghost We Keep is 3 hours and 46 minutes.
Wow.
That playlist is less representative of the story, and I've more tried to capture the music that Liam is listening to. So more Paramore, more Troye Sivan, but like American Football, Lorde, Marina Diamond, Rina Sawayama, FKA Twigs, Billie Eilish. Like it's very emo, and it's very Liam in my head. It is my plan to have a playlist that someone can listen to while they read the book, or if they just want to invoke the feelings of the book.
I'm ready. That's the kind of content creation I am here for. So on a different note, Gande from I'm Rainbow says, would you be interested in writing middle grade someday? And if so, what is something you love about middle grade?
I have an entire middle grade novel in my laptop saved.
I know you do.
And ready to go. I've been told that it is a mess by my agent and have been told the ways to fix it. But it's one of those things where I could read every single word aloud that she said, but putting them together in my head, it does not make any sense. Having read more middle grade recently, like not a ton, but like King of the Dragonflies and Hurricane Child are two amazing books. God, why did I just blank? George, Alex Gino, Jesus.
Yes.
My brain. You have these books, and I think what I've noticed, and I've especially noticed it out there, because my agent Lauren said this to me, and now that I've tried to research middle grade, read middle grade, I see it on the page, is that kids are a lot more blunt than teenagers are.
Yeah.
Like a kid will just tell you how they feel, even if they don't have the exact vocabulary for it. They'll just tell you how they feel, whereas I feel like as a teenager, a lot of us are expected to hide the feelings and mask them and sort of put band-aids and like nice words over them. That's hard for me to get at. I've never been someone who has been like super forward with my feelings, and it's why Ben is the way that they are. Bless their heart. I'm going to speak this into existence because I believe that one way to make something happen is to speak it into existence. But I will publish a middle grade novel. I will clean up the one that I'm writing. I was planning on starting the editing process of fixing it up on Monday when I was like, I'm not on deadline for anything right now. I'm stuck inside all day long. This could be something that I could fix while I'm here. It could be my quarantine project. And then not only do I get an email from my editor that's like, hey, expect booktube edits next week, I finally get my anthology contract, which to me is a green light go on write this 5,000 word short story before the deadline on August 1st. So I have to do the things that I'm getting paid to do first before I can.
That's valid.
Work on other projects.
We want you to make that coin. So the last question from MB readers I have is from Crescent Moon Reads, who wants to know, what is your number one dream project? And I want to add to that and say, what is your dream collab, and like who would you collab with?
The dream collab thing is easy because I've talked about them enough during this interview, but like if I got to try anything with Kacen, it would be amazing.
Would love that.
I would hate it for them because they're so much better at writing than I am. And so I would probably drag the project down a little bit. But
that's not true.
If I ever got to write anything with Kacen, that would be amazing. My absolute dream projects, I have 3, and perhaps it's time for these dreams to change because I don't know how they're going to happen. I don't know when they're going to happen, if they're going to happen, like whatever. I would love to write something for Steven Universe. In any way, shape, or form. I would love to work on some kind of Spider-Man project.
Yes.
Which Disney would not want me to do because I would get my little bisexual trans hands all over Peter Parker and just make him the biased transist character out there. And then my other dream project is writing absolutely anything for Star Wars, which is probably the thing that I can see happening, like, in this reality, the least likely thing, just because I don't write fantasy,
That's
I don't
true.
write science fiction. I have written Star Wars fan fiction, though,
Ooh.
and if I can toot my own horn, I think it's pretty good. But whatever. I don't think I can add that to my resume and send that to Disney.
But it's valid. So the only audience question I think I'm going to take, thank you, Kathy, for watching, but I think the only one I'm going to take is also from an NB person. It's D. And they said, have any adult readers thanked you for helping them see themselves in a way they hadn't experienced before? You mentioned trans youth, but so many adults haven't had this kind of representation before either.
I believe that I was in Iowa whenever I met this person. It was the first time I'd ever been asked to speak solo in an event, and I had no idea what was happening. But afterwards, there was this older person who, like, if I had to guess, like, between, like, 40 and 50, who came up to me and got their book signed, and we just had this long conversation about how whenever they were younger, none of this stuff was real. No one had the vocabulary. Even so far back as time periods like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, if you were trans, you were just called a cross-dresser. Right. And, like, that was it. You were secretly a gay man dressing as a woman, or secretly a gay woman dressing as a man. Like, it was these shades of black and white, and there was nothing in between them. To sit there and have this conversation with this person who had seen so much more than my 2 decades. Those 2 decades aren't even 2 decades, because I was a child for a large portion of them, so I can't even recall. But to just get there and sit there and talk with them for even just the 10 minutes that I think we got to talk, it was just such an amazing experience. I always feel, I don't want to say like more empowered and more vindicated whenever like an older person comes up and talks to me about this stuff, but it is like a special feeling. Unfortunately, we as trans people know that not a lot of trans people live to see late adulthood. It's so dangerous for them to even live and exist. To see someone who survived all that, it was just special.
Trans elders are so powerful, because it's just like,
oh yeah,
it just lets you know, like, it's possible. Like, you can live and you can thrive, and it's possible, and it's beautiful, and I love it. Before we wrap up, I love asking author guests for their book recommendations. So what are some past or future books written by NB or trans-spec authors that you're really excited about?
I was more prepared for this, but then I talked endlessly about Kacen. So read Felix Ever After
is a valid choice.
Felix Ever After is a book that I think everyone should desperately read. Any book by Kacen, the way that Kacen can balance so many different things, identity, sexuality, romance, like it's all handled with this like, it's almost like deft hand. I'm incredibly jealous of how they get to write so many different things at one time. It's not a trans book, but I think people have probably heard of it, but I think it's one that everyone needs to read. It's You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson.
Yes.
It's the sweetest story that I adore with all of my heart. It's so good. It's just the story of a young black teenage girl who is queer and trying to figure out how she's going to attend school. And it's so much more, though. And oh, God, I love it. I can't with that book. Oh, I guess I can. I don't need people to like be on the lookout for this. I have had the privilege of reading One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston.
Yes.
It is a superb book. People are like weirdly skeptical about One Last Stop after Red, White, Royal Blue. Like, will it live up to the hype? And One Last Stop is, I love Red, White, Royal Blue. I adore that book. One Last Stop is so much better.
Oh my gosh.
Like, you can just see how Casey's like craft has evolved just over like the 2 or 3 years between writing Red, White, Royal Blue and One Last Stop. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Not to tempt y'all, or, you know, we still have to wait until 2021 for that, but read Felix and You Should See Me in a Crown in the meantime.
So, to wrap up here, where can people find you on the internet? Where can they order your book? How can they support you? Are there any future events or virtual experiences you want to plug, or anything else you want to shout out before we dip?
You can always find me online at masondeaverwrites.com. I was very lucky to get that. As far as any buy links, I actually keep various links to various bookstores on my website. So just Mason Deaver Writes, you'll see I Wish You All the Best in the little books bar. Purchase now. You can pick between hardcover, paperback on like various stores, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, my local indie bookstore, the site that shall not be named. You can find me on Twitter at Mason Deaver. I was lucky to get that one too. It's just MasonDeaver. Instagram, I wasn't lucky. It's Mason_Deaver.
Well, that's all the questions I had for for you. So thank you so much again for being here. You've been very generous with your time and your answers, and it's been really great. And I'm just so glad you were here to be with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I love it.